Today is December 30th, 2021. We have a very special guest on the show today, Kameron Hurt. Kameron is an organizer with a coalition to free Ruchell Magee and a youth organizer with the Los Angeles branch of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Kameron also has been a guest of Black Power Media and Breakthrough News. Thank you and welcome to the show. Kameron, today I wanted to talk to you about the longest held political prisoner in the U.S., Ruchell Cinque Magee. Who is Ruchell Magee, and why is he someone that we should all know about?
Yeah, first of all, Ryan, I want to thank you for having me on the program. I want to mention that I love the background that you've got set up. I'm seeing Blood in My Eye, George Jackson. All of that is very central to why Ruchell is important as a person. And to know Ruchell, it's even important to go back to the name that he chose while he was in prison. Cinque. We call him Cinque because that was an African man from the Mende tribe who was born, back in the 1800s in modern day Sierra Leone. He was captured by slave traders, like so many millions of people were, and he was shipped to Havana in 1839. And then at the age of 25, a very young age, he led a ship revolt on La Amistad. There's a famous movie called Amistad that's about it. Many of your viewers are probably familiar with it. And it ended in this Supreme Court decision that actually acknowledged that they were free men escaping from illegal kidnapping to restore their freedom. And that is in the 1800s. This is before the Civil War. We know that African people had basically zero rights here in the United States at this point. But through the struggle and the determination that the original Cinque had, they were able to defend their freedom and actually be granted the ability to come back to their homeland. Now, we're going to get to why that connects to Ruchell's story, but Ruchell himself, he's born in a place that has the same legacy and the same scars of slavery as well. He's born in Louisiana, Franklinton to be exact. And in fact, he was born in KKK territory. He grew up with the Jim Crow dynamics, not that long after Reconstruction. He was born in 1939. So we want to mention as well, him being born in 1939 means he's now 82 years old. We're almost at the new year, so he'll be turning 83 in March. Absolutely ridiculous that he's still in prison, but he was born there. And at 16 years old, he's already given his first charge, which is, because he was affiliated with a white woman or legally found to have been, he is actually locked up for about 7, 8 years to start his life. This woman was several years older than him, but given the Jim Crow dynamics and the Klan territory, he's given this terrible trumped up charge, and he's locked up in Angola State Penitentiary, a former plantation. So even more ways that it connects to Cinque, right? This escaping plantation kind of motif that's running through this. So he spent 8 years in these conditions. His family's property gets confiscated because his mother dies while he's in there. And he's actually forced to relocate. He's almost exiled in a way, forced to relocate to Los Angeles, the city that I'm speaking to you from. So how long did he get to live in Los Angeles before racking up another charge? It was about 6 months, not very long. The white supremacist state, they seize him again. And this is 1963 that we're in right now. He's beaten, so many people are. He's hospitalized and he's arrested. For what charge? Nothing more than, he's accused of kidnapping and robbery for a $10 marijuana trade. A substance that we know is legal today, but it definitely wasn't at this time. And we know that, of course, a black man with these drugs is going to get the harshest sentence in the book. So we got 7 years to life. Ridiculous. This is already like, what kind of start to a life is this? That, he's already looking at potentially his whole life in prison, and he's barely started his life at this point. So this is the sort of desperation that's going to, start to build at this point. 1963, he's looking at his whole life being in prison. He's betrayed while he's in there as well by his lawyer, because we know there's this long history of even sometimes the lawyer pressuring the client to take that guilty plea, to disarm themselves, in the court sense. And it didn't work out for Ruchell at all. He was actually bound and gagged at his trial as well, which is something that we've seen. So, how many horrors can you put this person through? Um, the state had no end in what they were trying to do to him. So this is only, I guess, the beginning of his life, but I definitely want to, pause to see because there's so much more that we can go into. Yeah.
And you talked about in 1955 that when he was 16, he was arrested. And that same year was the same year Emmett Till, I believe, was lynched, mutilated, and murdered in August of 1955. So just to give the viewers a context of what was going on in the South at that time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And we know that, for example, what we found with the woman who Emmett Till was accused of offending, not even touching, none of those sorts of things, but the woman that he was accused of offending later came out and said that the story was a lie. But it doesn't
Mm,
matter what you do decades later.
mm,
Our brother Emmett Till will never come back.
mm,
So it's that sort of racism and that sort of immediately believing the guilt of any black man who's accused of a crime. And it's not hard to judge that maybe the reason he was treated so badly and given such a harsh sentence in Los Angeles is once they look back at his record and found what his crime was. I mean, to white police officers and white courts and white judges, that's the most offensive thing that you
mm,
can do.
mm.
So, absolutely.
And what happened with regards to Ruchell Magee on August 7th, 1970?
Yes, this is a day that's well remembered, and even in the book that's on the wall, "Blood in My Eye," a lot of time is definitely spent, thinking about that day. So, again, as many of your viewers know, that day is known as the Marin County Courthouse Rebellion. So, Marin County, this county in California, um, very important place. This is where Ruchell finds himself on August 7th. And in this courthouse, after 7 years of being tortured in this system with no opportunity for release, he feels truly hopeless at this point. So Ruchell he's not in court for his own case. Ruchell and William Christmas were some of the witnesses for the trial of James Mclean. So there's three people so far. I know this part can get confusing, but Ruchell and William Christmas are the witnesses for the trial of James Mclean, who's on trial for assaulting a guard, allegedly. And, you know, why was James Mclean accused of assaulting a guard? It was because Fred Billingsley, who was another prisoner, was brutally murdered by police as well. He was beaten and tear gassed to death in his cell in February of 1970. So here we are, 6 months after that incident. James Mclean is on trial for assaulting a police officer or a guard. So Jonathan Jackson, of course, the younger brother of Black Panther Party Field Marshal George Jackson, author of Soledad Brother and Blood in My Eye, amazing human being. His younger brother Jonathan Jackson, who's only 17 at the time, uh, 17, and his partner that he was with actually was, pregnant with a young child as well, or someone who would later become a child. And this is the sort of situation that Jonathan is in, even with the things that are going on in his life, even with his youth. He attempts to free his brother and the rest of the Soledad brothers, which we could go into as well, by taking control of that courtroom. George Jackson, his older brother, was not there, but they didn't abandon the plan. Jonathan announced, we're taking over, and he offered weapons to William Christmas, to James Mclean, and to Ruchell Magee. Now, while it's super easy for, of course, the courts and the police to jump on that part, and say, oh, he shouldn't have done this, he shouldn't have participated. That's why we emphasize the hopelessness and the 7 years of imprisonment, the 7 years to life sentence. This is a person who's never going to get a chance to get his case heard by the media. He probably felt like nobody cares about this. He was so far from where he grew up. Family members are dying, all these sorts of things. So in that moment, he did what perhaps a lot of people would do in that situation, which is he took the weapons that were offered. Um, so did Christmas and Mclean, and they're able to at least leave the courtroom. But what's important to emphasize too is Rochelle wasn't a planner of this that was going on. He was as shocked as anybody was in the courtroom. Uh, so we can't say that he was sitting there conspiring and planning and trying to make this happen. Uh, he knew this could be his last chance to escape this slavery and to get the world's attention. So the prison guards arrive, as they're leaving the building. And actually, once they get into a van, the San Quentin prison guards open fire on the van. Now, not only do they kill Jonathan Jackson, they kill William Christmas, they kill James Mclean, but they also kill Judge Harold Haley, and critically wound Ruchell and a prosecutor. So that is the brutality of the state that we're dealing with here. That they're willing to open fire. And the brother Harold Welton, who's another amazing organizer that we have here on the Coalition to Free Ruchell Magee, he found through doing some research that when some guards were asked, I think it might have been a sergeant, he was asked, well, what would you do if, say, there were several guards and judges and only like one prisoner? Would you still fire on them? And the answer was essentially yes. No matter what it was, there was a policy of if there's a person who is, imprisoned and they try to escape, you open all fire and prevent them from escaping no matter what.
Mm.
But that's 1970, August 7th. Rochelle barely survives. There's photos of him out there, laid on the ground, just from being wounded by these police bullets. But what we know is that while he wasn't the planner, while he wasn't, the conspirator that made it happen, they, the white supremacist state, they had to make somebody guilty of this. So that's why not only do they really try to throw the whole book and the whole jail at Rochelle, but also Angela Davis. This is where she's brought into this. She's accused of providing the weapons that Jonathan Jackson used when he entered the courtroom. Of course, she was later found to not be guilty after a massive, global movement to free her. And we think that's completely the fair thing to do. She was not guilty. If anything, those San Quentin prison guards should be guilty, but they haven't been found guilty. But Rochelle remains in prison to this day, and it's been, at this point, over 50 years, going on 52 years.
I think he's been in total 58 years, isn't it?
Yeah, 58 years if you count all the way back to his 1963 conviction in LA. And then if you add the other 8 years that he spent in Louisiana, you could say up to 65, 66 years.
Well over half of his life.
Yeah, he would have only known about 16 years of being outside of prison walls. And then I think it would be about 6 months in between moving from Louisiana to being arrested again. So 16 years and 6 months outside of prison, about 66 years inside. How much punishment does, the government want? Like, how much more is possible?
Mm-hmm. Especially as you noted, when you compare the outcome for Angela Davis, who was accused of planning, conspiring, providing weapons, and Ruchell Magee just happened to be there, and was not involved in planning, conspiring, providing weapons. And now Angela Davis is a famous professor. Everyone knows her, while Ruchell Magee is locked in a literal cage.
That's right.
At 83 years, so it would be 83 in March. My question was, well, what is the current status of the campaign to free Ruchell Magee?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. There's so much that has been done. There have actually been several waves of attempts to build coalitions to free Ruchell Magee because he's been in prison for so long. I mean, of course, in the 70s, this was a very hot, well-known national subject. But as we know, as there was a decline in, not only, for example, the Black Panther Party, the assault on that movement, the assault on the Black Power movement in general, on all liberation struggles within the United States, and we could even say beyond. I think by the 80s, by the 90s, the 2000s, this had started to, Rochelle faded from being as much of a household name, but we have to remember that each and every day, it doesn't matter if it's the 70s or the 90s or the 2020s, he's the one living through this sentence, living through the hell inside of there. So, what I can speak for is in 2019, we gathered several folks and decided that it was time to reignite the fight to free Ruchell Magee. So we developed the Coalition to Free Ruchell Magee in 2019. We have a website, beautifully made, called www.freeruchellmagee.org. You can find so much information about Ruchell there. You can see his story. You can view our list of endorsers, which I'll get to as well in a moment. Um, and you can also see the petition that we've developed. There's a link that basically allows you to write a letter directly to the governor of California, who has the power to commute the sentence of Ruchell Magee. And we've been doing our best to, you know, build a sort of movement that is calling for this in many ways. So when we first launched in March 2021, that was when we first did our initial action, um, which was actually a press conference outside of the three locations. So we did one in Sacramento, which is the capital of California. We did one in Los Angeles, which is important because that's where he was initially arrested in California. And then there was one more in the Marin County Courthouse area where, of course, the Marin County Courthouse rebellion happened. So we launched with that, launched our website, and opened up a bunch of social media as well. So on Facebook, you can find us as the Coalition to Free Ruchell Magee. Also on Instagram, we're at Free Ruchell Magee. So this is the kind of work that we have been doing, and to supplement that too, we've been doing plenty of interviews. Thank you for mentioning, of course, Black Power Media having us on. We were also on Breakthrough News as well. We've been on By Any Means Necessary with Sean Blackman and Jackie Lukeman. Um, so many more shows that we can mention. And I'm thankful to every single person who has been willing to shine light on this, because we know that with very few exceptions, corporate and mainstream media are not interested in a story like this. I mean, for some reason or another, even though it has so much to do with, especially the Black Lives Matter movement and the movement for Black lives, this is a Black person whose life is definitely at risk. And at the same time, you wouldn't see this coverage, even though it's someone who's been held longer than so many people who have actually been convicted of murders. I won't bring up any names right now, but even people who have directly harmed the president of the United States, or like people running for president, and then they at least have like chances of parole. So what we want is to, he had a parole board hearing back in July. So we did our best to write to the parole board to get as much information as we could and support Ruchell. And the parole board decided, you know what, he's not fit for parole. He's going to have to wait 3 more years. But we have to remember, 3 years for an 82-year-old man is 3 years too long, of course. Nobody has that kind of time, but especially during a pandemic like this, especially at his advanced age, that's absolutely inhumane, and we think that's wrong. But not only that, just a couple of weeks ago now, we held another major press conference outside of CNN Los Angeles, because we had reached 40 years since his first parole denial. So he was first denied parole in December 17th, 1981. So that's 11 years after the Marin County Courthouse Rebellion. He got his first parole denial. And this July marked 13 parole denials. Okay. So it's like, no matter what he's done, despite not having added any crimes, despite not causing any trouble, he's actually been what's called a jailhouse lawyer, but he's been supporting other prisoners in their release, just being as stellar as possible. And still, we believe, because of political reasons, is being treated as though he's a danger to society. But we found evidence that he is on a walker now. He has to walk with support. Um, and especially when we know that we've lost many, beautiful political prisoners from the Africa family members to um, Romaine Chip Fitzgerald, who we were very close with the folks trying to release him as well. And some of our organizers were his comrades back in the day, as well as Russell Maroon Schultz. We can't allow this to happen again. And that's why we're here advocating for the release of all political prisoners. Um, and truly for, whether it's the DA in Los Angeles or in Marin County, any of these folks who can support, any of these people who can, actually pull some levers and actually commute the sentence, we're supporting that. But I do want to give a major shout out to the endorsers that we have as well. Many folks, and one of them was already mentioned on this call. Angela Davis recently did offer an endorsement of the coalition, which we're very appreciative of. We hope that people will stay tuned so that they can see things that are coming in the future with that. Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. has been an endorser. Harold Taylor and Hank Jones of the San Francisco Eight. Also, author and UCLA professor Robin D.G. Kelly, Black Lives Matter co-founder Patrice Cullors, and Black Lives Matter LA leader Melina Abdullah, and then presidential candidates like Gloria La Riva, Peta Lindsay. And then as far as organizations, we've got Black August LA, the Answer Coalition, the Malcolm X Grassroots Movement, National Jericho Movement, the Northeast Political Prisoner Coalition, so many other organizations, including the Party for Socialism and Liberation, which I'm an organizer with, are in this fight together. So we're constantly trying to grow not only the media presence, but also the endorsements, the number of signatures we have on our petition, and spreading that letter to the governor as much as we can.
And how can we support political prisoners generally, and specifically, how can we support Ruchell Magee?
It's a great question. We believe that an important part, and honestly, the way that I became the most familiar was not only my work with the PSL, but when I met folks from Black August Los Angeles. And for folks who don't know, Black August is an annual commemoration of the sacrifices of African people in the struggle for liberation that has lasted centuries now. And I was first introduced to that concept in around 2018, I believe. I only moved to Los Angeles in 2016, but soon after, I found the rich tradition of commemorating how much happened in August, from Nat Turner's rebellion to the births of several very important people in our struggle. Both on heroic moments and defeats and births and all of these sorts of things that are related to August. But Black August LA, for example, was the organization that helped show me how deep the tradition of solidarity with political prisoners is. So I really encourage folks to, in your own ways, in your own cities, wherever you're viewing from, connect with organizers who are doing Black August work in the right way, in a way that's not commercializing it, in a way that's not, belittling it or trying to make it, oh, the second Black History Month. No, it's a month about struggle, a month about perseverance through imprisonment and enslavement and all of these things, so that, one day we can commemorate it as looking back, now we've won the rights that we've been fighting for. And now we can remember and honor our martyrs, our lost, our fallen in the way that they need to. But for example, if there's no organizations or people doing that in your area, it's never too late to start commemorating it, to look into political prisoners, to read authors like, George Jackson and so many others who have been incarcerated, and also to do your best to stay tuned into the number of organizations that have been fighting for the release of political prisoners. For example, there's coalitions and groupings of people trying to free Mumia Abu Jamal, trying to free Matulu Shakur, Ruchell Magee, of course. So many other people that we could talk about. And I see the amazing list of people at the bottom of the screen. I mean, even starting with a quick Google of these people, the Leonard Peltiers, the, Reverend Joy Powell, all these amazing people, you can figure out, even writing to them is an amazing step. That was where I started. Was you can find all of their addresses on various websites like the Jericho Movement website, um, and some others. But if you also go to, speaking about how to help, particularly with Ruchelle's case, if you go to the freeruchellemcgee.org website, not only can you find Ruchelle's address where you can write to him, he's in California Medical Facility in Vacaville, California, but you can also find our petition, like I mentioned, which has over 1,000 signatures. We have a secondary petition on change.org, which has over 32,000 signatures. So we really encourage those because it does show, even if a petition isn't the only answer, it's like at least it's showing that thousands and thousands of people care about this person, and want to see him free. Then we also have, if you go to the link, it's like bit.ly/right, like you're writing, for the number Ruchelle. So that's bit.ly/right for Ruchelle. You can actually write a letter directly to the governor of California. We're nearing 1,000 letters on that. We really want to break 5,000 though. And then beyond that, we want 10,000, as many as we can, because that's the sort of pressure that can, again, show that this isn't some case that we're going to allow the government and the courts to forget about. Like, oh, this happened in 1970. People don't care anymore. People only care about X or Y. No, we will not forget him because he is the longest held political prisoner in the US and, by my count, in the world. That's not something that we can take lightly. So we have to make sure, and speaking on behalf of some of the elders who I work with who aren't here right now, um, but are definitely still supporting this work. They think it's amazing and beautiful that so many young people, people of all ages, are interested in this because they watched the interest really spike and climb back in the 70s, and then a slow, painful decline in it. So I think the work that's being done on many fronts to free these people who we recognize as the soldiers of the past, and who are truly the soldiers of the present as well. Um, they're really crucial fights, we believe, because the activists and the organizers of today can always become the political prisoners of tomorrow.
Absolutely. And I'll add the links in the comment section or the description section of the YouTube page. But I had another question for you. In the wake of the murder of George Floyd by the police in May of 2020, there was this incredible grassroots movement which led to the defund movement. But one of the things that seemed to be kind of lacking from that movement was the centering of political prisoners. And so I guess my question to you is, what is the importance of continuing to fight to free all the political prisoners in the U.S., and why is it important to center them in any movement for liberation?
That's right. That's a very important point. They have to go together, of course. The fight to end police brutality, to make sure that Black people can walk the streets, drive down the streets, live, in peace and without the threat of police terror, is essential. There's no other way to put it. So I definitely consider myself, a participant in that movement that really sparked last year. Um, being in LA, there were many, many protests, and we would always do our best to emphasize how these things are connected, to emphasize that when you come down to it, political prisoners are victims of police brutality often, but also prison guard brutality. I don't know if that's a term that's really used, but what do you call it if you're abused every single day, for decades, by people who are just offshoots of the police, essentially? I mean, it's like they're not two separate systems, like, oh, we have to fight for this or that. We view them as connected because many of the people are victims, like we said, themselves. Um, and also because not only do we need to be in the streets when, someone loses their life, someone who, for example, isn't involved in the political movement. That is, of course, incredibly important. And then at the same time, there are these people who are frozen in prison, stuck in prison, uh, for fighting for the civil rights, fighting for the political liberation, fighting for the justice that has been lacking from this country since way back when it was founded. Because it's like we have to make sure that these people are not forgotten. We have to make sure that not only do we praise people after they've passed away, but we also have to make sure that while they're living, these people who dedicated their lives. I know that, for example, Chip Fitzgerald, when he was first arrested, he was incredibly young. He was a young activist, a young organizer, a young Black Panther Party member. So a lot of young people hit the streets this year. So it's like you have to draw that connection that these political prisoners, they're in prison because of what they did, or maybe they came to political consciousness while they were inside. But I believe that they have to go hand in hand. And many of the organizations, including the Party for Socialism and Liberation, the Answer Coalition, including Black Lives Matter LA, have been very supportive of both, the movement to free political prisoners, like Ruchell Magee. Um, all those organizations have shared, for example, the petitions and those sorts of things to get the word out and draw that connection that not only is it about victims of police brutality, but also political prisoners. And I think that's a very important piece for young people to understand. But it might just be me, but I feel like books like Blood in My Eye, Asada, even the autobiography of Malcolm X, these books are becoming more popular again, it feels like. These are books I didn't really know, of course, when I was in elementary school, middle school, but now it feels like there's a lot more discussion about them. And like young people are getting more interested, which is a really, really good sign, learning from the past.
Absolutely. And I would add that any movement that doesn't center political prisoners is a flawed movement because
Hmm.
the government knows that, if we can just lock you up and forget about you and no one's going to do anything. So until we really center political prisoners and focus on their freedom, the government knows that they can just keep locking us up one by one, disappearing us essentially, and which makes our movement flawed. So I'm really hoping that we continue, as you noted, that these books and the movement is gaining steam, that we continue to center political prisoners, and the work that you're doing is so incredible because of that. So I thank you for everything you're doing and all of your comrades.
Thank you very much. I know that, one day they were all excited to hear about this. So I'm sure one day we'll be meeting again and discussing even more. We hope to have good news in 2022. Um, news of liberation. That's what we're here for. And I believe, of course, the work that's being done here on your program as well is very, very important. And I'm thankful for it.
Those are all the questions I have for you. Is there anything else that you wanted to add that we didn't get to?
Well, of course, I thank the viewership and everybody who's giving this a chance. And I hope that if you viewed this and you felt something at any point in this interview, that you do your best to not only sign, not only write that letter, um, reach out to Rochelle using the address that we have on the website. He writes back. He's definitely someone who deals with a lot of people writing to him, of course, being nationally known, but one quote that he really wanted to get out, that he shared and that he wants us to share with the public, quote, "I'm still fighting to get the truth to the real people who want growth in the human race. Truth is the right medicine, and we must fight to win." Um, so we believe that those words, they echo incredibly loudly in our ears every single day. And this is definitely a classic case of racism, police brutality, terrible sentencing standards, so many other things. But we don't believe that this fight is over by any means, and we want to emphasize that not only is there still a chance for Rochelle to enjoy the rest of his life on the outside of the prison walls, but that's true for all the political prisoners that we talk about. Um, and we believe that if you love Rochelle in this way, even if you have someone who's incarcerated, maybe let them know about what's going on with Rochelle. Talk to other people. Talk to people about what's going on. Share it on your social media. share the website, www.freerochellemcgee.org, and let's get the word out coast to coast and internationally everywhere that we can.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Again, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for all the work that you and the entire Free Rochelle committee does. And hope to have you again on the show. Happy New Year and Free Ruchell Magee.
Happy New Year, and thank you so much for having us on the program. It's an honor.